Well, good evening and welcome to the Arbor Hills Nature Preserve in Plano, Texas. Tonight's exercise is part one of a two-part field evaluation of the ACEBEAM P17 Defender Flashlight. I want to thank ACEBEAM for sending me this light and making the review possible. I've actually been looking forward to this for some time for potential applications in wilderness search and rescue, which is my primary use case. But before that, I need to do a basic field test. We've got a very challenging environment tonight. We're in a nature preserve. There is light pollution from the surrounding city. There is a half moon out tonight. Well, half moon is about average. So the combination of those circumstances will make for a decent test tonight. I just want to point out a couple of things very quickly. You have dual controls on the tail cap, on, off, momentary, output level. There are 3 modes you can run this light in: daily and a couple of tacticals. Tonight, I'm going to be testing daily. Real simple, low, medium, high, turbo. Just the basics, what you get out of the box when you charge the light and go. And speaking of going, I need about another 25 to 30 minutes, and then we can get this show started. All right, here we are at the bridge. I've got the ACEBEAM in low. There's medium. High. Maximum line of sight from this position is not quite 42 yards. I mean, way back to the edge there. And turbo. All right, well, let's go deeper in the preserve and let's see what this light can really do. Well, something I do a lot in search and rescue is scanning tree lines, and I always like to get an idea of what I can do with the light at various modes and various distances. And we're looking at a collection of tree lines here, all of which are less than 50, 60 yards away from me. And I'm just slowly scanning in medium right now, just trying to get an idea of the visibility I have inside those trees, which from this distance and this level of illumination is not bad at all. Yeah, I can see the rabbit in the distance there. I always like to do a test that is path following, and this is in case I have to give a light to someone and have them follow me, or worst case scenario, I have a catastrophic failure of all my lighting systems. Mr. Murphy and his law have triumphed, and I'm down to this one light. So what's the lowest mode that I can use to safely follow a groomed path? I'm on low right now. This seems to be getting the job done. Situational awareness downrange and side to side is not that great, but it's certainly adequate. Again, just for following a groomed path. Let me bump that up 1 to medium. Definitely a lot better and still a lot of run time. So I might be able to get by with low, but in this particular scenario, I definitely prefer medium. And on the subject of low and medium, I think that's enough of low and medium. I want to get an idea of how well this light performs in high and turbo. High is kind of what I call the money mode. That's probably the one that I would use most. And so let's go deeper in the preserve and do some more tests. Okay, you may have seen this spot before in some of my other videos. The tree line in front of me angles off to the left and is well over a football field and just keeps going out in distance until I lose line of sight. I'm illuminating this in high right now, and what I'm really seeing now is that you have a very, very generous wide hot spot with a modest amount of spill. But this type of hotspot can be very useful in doing quick area searches inside 100, 125, maybe 150 yards, and in a lot of wilderness environments that I have to work in. That tends to be my average maximum line of sight. It's very rare to be able to actually get outside of 150 yards line of sight. Of course, for that I have long throw lights. So I'd say this is actually a pretty good test. So this is one of those areas that I can actually get just over 150 line of sight just through that chute in front of me. I'm in high right now, and I can just barely see the far tree line. In fact, if I didn't know it was there, it might be hard to make out. So let's bump that up into turbo, and definitely have better visibility to that far tree line. Again, it's not a long throw light, but I mean, for just basic detection, I'm kind of thinking out to 150 or so in bad atmospheric and light polluted environments is probably the edge of the envelope, but we'll see how that holds up. So here we are at the top of the observation tower. A lot of wind tonight, a lot of particulates in the air, light pollution from the surrounding city. Very difficult test environment. I'm in turbo now. I think you can see what I mean about that very wide hot spot, but I prefer something like this out to about 100, 150 yards. What I want to do now is shut this down, put it aside, and let you see a contrast between the P17 and a real thrower. That is the L19 V2, which is my standard long throw light, and you can compare the specs in terms of peak lumens and peak candela, but that'll just show you kind of how I would use these two lights. The P17 is more of a detection light, and then once I make a detection, I would use something like the L19 V2 to turn detection into identification. All right, well, let's move on and look at some more test cases. Now we are at the bottom of the observation tower. We have the tower to the left. I'm looking back into a very dark pocket of trees about 60, 70 yards. Of course, turbo does a great job. Nothing new here. I'm really looking at this more as a heat test. I'm going to leave it on here for a while. I've got my fingers much closer to the head of the light, and then we'll also look at it as a step down test. If memory serves, the step down occurs at about 40 seconds. It's definitely getting warm, but not uncomfortable. I would have thought I would have seen a more aggressive step down from this point, but it's still going solid. Definitely getting hotter too. Okay, now it's definitely at a point that it is uncomfortably hot. And at this point, I'm going to shut it off for heat. And finally, there's the step down. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. And yeah, my fingers are telling me, get this light off. This is more of a reflections test in medium output level. Situations like this, let's say that I noticed that there were some heel or drag marks right in this area, and so maybe I'm looking for a younger child, and we're worried about an abduction scenario, and that would be a clear sign that someone may have been dragged down in this area. So I have to do a quick scan, but I want to make sure that the reflections coming back off the trees aren't prohibiting me from seeing deep inside the tree line. And yeah, from what I'm seeing here, the medium mode is working just fine. But I thought that would make an interesting test. And speaking of tests, let's go back to the parking lot and finish off with a couple of photonic barrier tests. I am back in the parking lot with the street light behind me, a lit building ahead of me, some dark areas to the left and right of that building. Let's light that up in high. Back and forth. Then in turbo. Right, I'm going to do one more test from the back of the playground area, and I'll do a quick summary. I am at the back of one of the playgrounds. I have my headlamp on 400 lumen flood. Let's see how the ACEBEAM looks here in high. Pan slowly around. So overall, I thought it performed reasonably well in a difficult environment. I'm looking to see how well it holds up in a darker wilderness setting, and on that tone, part 2 of this evaluation is going to be at the LBJ Grasslands outside of Decatur. I will use the P17 as a probably headlamp mounted light in an actual search and rescue training exercise. In terms of just operation, I found it fairly easy to use. The switches worked well. You will notice that this on-off momentary is completely exposed. Now, it does take quite a bit of pressure to activate that, but depending on how you intend to carry it, you may want to think of that in terms of an AD. For me personally, it would be a probably helmet mounted light, so that would not be an issue. Let's get it back on here, up quick into turbo. And I hope you got the information you were looking for tonight. And as always, until the next review, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for watching the video.